We're now joined by Chris Lovell, Texas Tech radio broadcaster, analyst. It was there in San Francisco. He and Jeff Haxton had quite the night, as did a lot of Red Raider fans, in what was a memorable night in San Francisco. Chris, so give us your timeline. Game is over. We're going to get to that moment, but game ends, the adrenaline. What time did you go to bed, and how much sleep did you get?
Yeah, I mean, it's the time change has got me all screwed up anyway. I don't know how these West Coast people do it. It's not my cup of tea, but yeah, we heck, I don't know, Smokey. When we got back to the hotel, and this hotel was a circus. There was just people out on the because when you get to the tournament, there's a police escort with the team bus, and so we got an escort back to the hotel, and you get to the hotel, and it's just chaos. Everybody's enjoying themselves and all that, and you're just like, man, I just want to get up to my room. But I fought my way through the crowd, and I guess I shut it down here about midnight, 12:30 local time, but which would have been about 2:30 you guys. But one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to go back and rewatch the last 15 minutes of regulation and overtime and all that, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, because there's just so much that happened in that game that I couldn't believe it. We're in the business of radio, and your job is to tell the story and talk and all that. And there were times last night where I was a bit speechless. I just couldn't believe what I was witnessing in front of me, because you were dead to rights, and then you weren't. And it was just one of those games that it didn't matter who you were rooting for, you're going to remember it for a long time. And second biggest Sweet 16 comeback in the history of the tournament, and all those things. But it was just an honor, and it was very special to be there, to witness it, and to be a part of it. And survive in advance. Whoever coined that phrase, that was applicable last night for sure.
Chris, you've been with this team every step of the way this year. You knew that they had it in them to close this gap, but but was there a point where you thought, good run, guys? Was it that 11-minute mark for you, or did you always think this just needs one little thing?
Paul, I think when you're down 16 with 10 minutes and change to go, I think it felt pretty bleak. And the problem is what you're saying is okay, you could have, a few things happened and you feel better about it. But the problem is you're doing this shorthanded, and I'm okay, who can get hot? Who can save you? Who can provide the juice? And you're riding Toppin, you're riding Darion Williams, and they were having semi-average nights to that point, and Darion Williams just hadn't shot it well. Elijah Hawkins, your point guard, who had been so good, just was having one of his worst games. And yet you have a kid named Christian Anderson just he didn't come out of nowhere, but he's done this all year long, but he hadn't had the best NCAA tournament. And then he just kind of starts to figure it out. And then Darion hits a few shots. And you just kind of – but the point of the whole deal is that Arkansas played a very comfortable game. They controlled that entire game up until, 6 to 7, 8 minutes left. And you could never – look, I've seen Arkansas plenty this year, and they're crazy talented. I mean, this was a top 10 preseason team, folks. I mean, they pay their coach makes $8 million a year. They're paying their roster. Rumors are about $7 to $10 million a year. John Tyson, the Tyson Chicken, he's one of John Calipari's best friends. I mean, so they're well funded. The talent has not been their problem. And I thought, okay, you just run into a team that's finally got it all figured out. But what was crazy is they have moments where they look very inexperienced and young and not on the same page. But you could never make them feel any pressure to see if they would crack, if they would screw anything up. And then finally, when you got to that point, lo and behold, they started to miss, and you could feel like you're starting to put some pressure on them. So that was the fact that you just gotten it to that point. I'm like, okay, well, maybe, but when Knox hits the three in the corner to go up 6 with, I guess it was about a minute left, I thought, okay, you've worked really hard, you know, and it may not be your day, and you've tried, and maybe they're just not going to be denied, and then yet you bury 2 threes in a row to tie the game, and we go to overtime, and we know how it ended. But just a wild scene here last night.
I listened to calls the last, I guess, minute or two with you and Jeff. It was posted by somebody who's a Texas Tech fan. Might have even been the radio station. I don't know. And as a broadcaster, I was curious. Sometimes you can lose it. Sometimes you know, it's just the enthusiasm. I mean, you love Tech. You've covered them for a long, long time. How many times, I may be giving something away here, how many times when they were making the comeback did you ever like pop Jeff on the thigh or something like that, or elbow or whatever, as they were making this run? Because I've done that. Paul, you know I've done that. How much do you get into it in a way like that as you're watching this transfold in front of you?
Well, and that's why I think that's what makes a good broadcaster, and you know that, is that you've got to have some real emotion into it. If you're just a robot, then what are you doing this for? I'll be honest with you, like I've done that before. Last night wasn't necessarily me popping him on the leg type of night, because I was in shock. I literally just couldn't believe you were doing this, because none of it was easy, and it was just kind of this slow death by 1,000 paper cuts for Arkansas anyway, that were able to kind of slowly kind of come back. And then the moment when Darion Williams hit that 3 to tie it, to send it to overtime essentially. Now you still had to survive Arkansas getting one last crack at it to try to win it in regulation. But when he hit that 3 to tie it, I mean, I was like, okay, we're witnessing something really special here. And I had the guy next to me, who I didn't even know, he's filming it, and I said, "Dude, can you send that to me?" Like, I mean, because I'm trying to do the radio thing, and he sent it to me. But yeah, I mean, you can't help but feel Grant's emotion and the emotion of these kids, and you're right, and you're doing all this shorthanded, and it sucks. I hate that part, that you don't have all your players available to you, and that's what's just frustrating, because it's like, you know some of these kids, they just need a little help. If you just had a little bit more help and another guy, and it happens to be one of your best guys in Chance McMillan, you'd really love to see what you're capable of. But the fact that they've gotten to the Elite Eight without one of their best players is just unbelievable to me. And Grant McCasland has just done a phenomenal job with these kids, but he just refuses not to believe. I mean, that's the thing. And they all kind of buy in, and they just keep swinging away, and it's worked out so far. But boy, their toughest test is yet to come. I mean, this Florida team is loaded, and you could play really good and still lose.
So let's talk about the Florida Gators and Todd Golden's team. They have probably the most highly functioning offense in the country when it comes to all the different things they do. Not to knock Alabama and their 7,000 threes that they made last night, but Florida and the way that they do everything and how they get everybody involved. Plus, they have a guy who's modeled his game after Steph Curry very clearly, and Walter Clayton Jr., and is doing a pretty good impression of it right now. And he didn't even have a good game last night by his standards. He was kind of ho-hum, and they still won. How does Tech match up with this team, especially last night? They only played 7 guys. Florida's going to play more than that, and they have so much length and speed.
Yeah, I mean, pick anything. I mean, they out rebound everybody. I mean, it's one of the top teams in the country. This is what you sign up for when you get to this point in the tournament. That's the way it's supposed to work typically. And yeah, they average about 85 a game. You actually average more threes a game than they do, but they out rebound their team, their opponents by about 8 a game. I mean, they can score from all 5 spots. But here's why I would say that you can match up. They're not. This is not the best defensive team now. I mean, you can, like last night I watched them. They turned it over 13 times in the first half against Maryland. Now Maryland, they're inexperienced and they just weren't quite good enough to take advantage of some of that. But you can score on these guys, and I think Tech is. The numbers love their offense too. I mean, you're averaging over 80 a game, and I just think you're going to have to shoot it well. Okay, bottom line, you're going to have to. You can't have a night like you did last night. You also can't go through a scoring drought, because if you get down 16 against these guys, forget it. I just don't see that you can put enough defense together to get back in it. But I mean, it's going to take beating, playing your best game and beating one of the top teams in the country, which I would say, I don't know if you can do that, but I've seen this team do it. I mean, to go win in Houston, because you may be about to see the best offense in the country. You've seen the best defense in the country, without a doubt. I don't want to hear any St. John's talk or, Drake. I think, in a lot of metrics, had one of the best defenses in the country. Houston plays the best defense in the country. Period. End of story. And you beat those guys once. You had 6 players on a Monday night in Lubbock, Texas, and it goes down to less than a minute to go before Milos Uzan, gets a second chance opportunity and makes a 3 to put you away that night. So I just think you'll be a tough out. I don't know what it looks like. I just know that you better have a low turnover game and you better shoot it well. And if you do that, you could put a scare into these guys, but it's going to require a really, really good effort. And I just don't know if Texas Tech can continue to shoot it as poorly, because it's crazy. You made it to the Elite Eight, and you've strung together about 3 very average to below average shooting nights for you. And it's nuts that you're this far, but that's just been the reality of it. You haven't shot it well in this tournament, and yet you continue to find ways to win.
Chris, off the hardwood, spring football rolling on along. Obviously a big offseason for Texas Tech, a lot of excitement about the future. I feel like spring football's just weird across the board this year, and the conversation about it is obviously about doing scrimmages with other teams and all of that. So it's been kind of weird to follow a lot of teams, but how would you, summarize Texas Tech and just sort of what spring ball's been like through a couple of weeks, and just the mood, the atmosphere, and I guess the big talking points?
Yeah, they've got their first scrimmage tomorrow, and you're right. I think there's a lot of chat. I mean, Joey's like, "Hey, does A&M want a scrimmage? How about does Texas want a scrimmage? Do we do something with Oklahoma?" He tried to do the whole deal with Dion in Colorado. So I don't know where all this is going. If any of that really comes to pass, in the immediate or next year or whatever. But it's been fun, and I'm here for it. If they all want to scrimmage like these NFL teams do, the chatter though in Lubbock is going to continue to be about all the new additions that they've had and the added competition. I think as a broadcaster, we keep being told by Joey, he's like, "Hey man, you're going to need some more places on your spotting board. We just have a lot more proven depth than we've ever had before." And that's fun for a coach, because it doesn't, speaking of this injury stuff, we're talking about the basketball team, you feel like you're covered in a lot of places if somebody goes down here or there. And it's just never been like that, but you can acquire that, which they did. And so that's what I'm, when I get back and this basketball thing ends, whenever it does, I can't wait to just see what the depth looks like along the lines of scrimmage, and the speed that they've added at running back and at receiver and at tight end and whatnot. But that's kind of the storyline now. And all the while you don't have your quarterback healthy and practicing just yet. And Baron Morton, he's going to miss the spring. So that's kind of what the talking points to answer your question have been to this point. But man, if they want to tee it up at the Star in Frisco against Dion's team, I'll be there for it. I got no problem with that. I'd love it.
Yeah, you never know, and obviously a lot of momentum. And of course, we mentioned the Dion contract earlier today to start off our show. Joey, with his high school background, and Chris, thank you, man. I know it's been like a blur, and you probably couldn't wait to get. You'll sleep really well tonight, whenever that might be. But with his high school background, the spring drills, it always seemed like that would be part of his wheelhouse. But that you want to make sure they would do crossover. You think they would want to do that in the spring? Or do you ever think we might get to that point, if it ever gets approved, that they could do it in the fall too, in August?
Yeah, I think what's going to end up happening is I really think that there's not going to be spring football anymore, and there's going to be like what they would term like OTA type stuff, what the pros do like in the summertime. And I think you may start to see, and I'm not going to be surprised if you start to see joint practices. Those NFL teams do this all the time, like for a couple of days. The Niners and the Chargers are going to get together, or the Raiders and the Cowboys, and you just kind of have controlled stuff, and there's fights that break out, and you kind of, it's always somebody that's not on your schedule for the regular season. But I absolutely think that's the way this thing is headed, and again, they'll figure out a way to monetize it, and like sell tickets to it or whatever. I think that's where we're absolutely headed. I just think traditional spring football will eventually go away.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I know it's been a barrage, battering ram, whatever, a blur, like I said, but great call. I did get to listen to it and enjoy the day. Watch some basketball tonight. Get a good meal and have fun. Enjoy it. Thanks for your time. Get Tech in the Big 12 in at least one more team in the Final Four. Hopefully Houston gets there again tonight.
All right, you got it, boys. I appreciate it. Keep hope alive.
Red Raider Sports, Texas Tech. He's a sideline analyst.